Thank you, everybody, for joining us live today. And today we are talking on the Design MBA show. This is a real life MBA podcast for designers. So basically, if you're a designer that wants to do your side hustle or launch your own venture, this is the place to be at. So go to designmba.show for more episodes and start your own venture. Today, I have a phenomenal guest with me, Craig Mott. Craig Mott is a Japan-based author and photographer. His books include Kissa by Kissa, Koya Bound, and Art Space Tokyo. He's a MacDowell, VCCA, and Ragdale Fellow. His writing and photography has appeared in Eater, The Atlantic, California Sunday Magazine, The New Yorker, and other publications. This is just a short blurb of who Craig Mott is. He is a freaking amazing guy. Craig, thank you so much for coming on the show, man. It means a lot to me.
Oh, thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, it just, one of the biggest challenges I had with interviewing you is usually it's like the opposite. It's like I have to dig and find some interesting nuggets. With you, it was like, damn, this guy has done so much cool things in such a short span. I'm like, where do I begin? And what I want to start off with is I had no idea that you were a stock geek since the age of 15. Like, how did that happen?
Oh God. Yeah. Oh, I thought you said I was a stock geek from Asia. Something about Asian stocks or something.
Oh, no. Age of 15.
Yeah. No, I guess appropriate for an MBA show question to begin with. So I grew up in this very blue collar town where basically there wasn't a lot of wealth. I grew up with my mother and my grandparents. My dad was elsewhere, and like tiny house. My grandfather worked at the airplane engine factory, and when he wasn't working there, he sold pens. There wasn't this sense of wealth. And in high school, I remember kind of the stock market appearing on the radar, and I was sort of a science geek and a math geek, and I just thought, oh, this is interesting. Not only is it interesting, but it's like, Robin Leach fame. It's like everyone was like, it's like you got to have a stockbroker and buy stocks. And I was just like, all right. There's literally no one in my near circle that has even has ever talked to a broker in their life, let alone bought a stock. My grandparents were so afraid of things like the stock market. They just savings accounts, and this is back when a savings account could produce real returns. I mean, they had genuine interest rates kind of sitting behind them. Yeah, when I was 15, there was like kind of a stock broker club thing in high school, and we got like $1,000 fake dollars and invested in some stocks, and I was just kind of captivated by it. It was just really crazy to me that you could buy pieces of companies, giant companies like GE, or I mean, that was just amazing to me. And so yeah, I was lucky in that sense to kind of get exposed to that. And so then that was part of my MO was whenever I got any money, couple $100 for your birthday or whatever, like I just immediately was like, how can I invest this? That was my I didn't think about buying stuff. I was always just like, all right. I kind of had this intuitive sense that to get out of whatever it was that was I guess defining the area I grew up in order to get out of there, I was gonna need some strategies, and I kind of intuited that perhaps stocks were one of the exit tools to kind of elevate myself outside of that town.
To a better life, I would say.
To just a different place. I mean, I definitely had this impulse from when I was young to get out, to travel, to see the world, to kind of understand things a little more. I think part of that comes from being adopted, and you just have this in kind of implicit sense of the quote unquote like true story of who you are is unknown. And so, there's this weird psychology there with adoption where, especially if you don't obviously know your birth parents, that there's like, oh, okay, there's this whole other story outside of what I know that kind of pulls you in different directions.
Wow. And what was this town where you were raised?
Near Hartford, Connecticut.
Oh, so wow.
It's just funny because you don't think of Connecticut as like having blue collar anything, but there's obviously, towards New York City, in the country, it's just all Maseratis, yachts, and people smoking golden pipes. But and I didn't know that because my town was not that. And I went to university and I met other people from Connecticut, and I was like, "Who are? This is what Connecticut people look like, from the outside." And everyone I met, At university, they're like, "Where did you come from?" I'm like,
Yeah.
Connecticut. And they're like, "Ooh, Connecticut? Did you come on your helicopter?" Uh, no, did not come on a helicopter. Yeah, there are kind of amazing. It was, and my town was also extremely diverse. And
Hmm.
one of these things when growing up, you don't really know how to value. But
Yeah.
my best friends in high school were Vietnamese and Indian,
Oh wow.
and I think about the mix of people that I
Yeah.
interacted with, and the mix of not only just races but different
Hmm.
varying life experiences, all within this kind of blue collarish background. It was super rich. It was crazy. I mean, I'm very grateful for that experience.
Wow. I grew up for most of my life in Ahmedabad, Gujarat in
Mm,
India. And Ahmedabad basically was the birthplace of Mahatma Gandhi, and
cool.
where he has his shelter too. So I didn't get much exposure, I would say, until I want to say maybe 2010 or 11 when I started traveling outside of India, like really and spending time with like different cultures and different races. And then it was like, oh man, like this is a very different way of thinking. And have you tried to like keep in touch with any of those your friends, Vietnamese and Indian friends from high school or
Not not
university?
not a ton. I haven't been very good. I mean, there's sort of like tenuous connections on Facebook, but no
Hmm.
one. I don't use
Yeah.
Facebook. I haven't updated Facebook in 5 years probably. Really a ton. I do wonder how some of those folks are doing, but I haven't been good about keeping in touch with high school people for sure, but also
Yeah.
college people. I think part of it is just you end up having such a kind of divergent experience compared to most of the even people I went to college with, and you just kind of you keep evolving your little pocket,
Yeah.
of family in the world. So yeah.
That's true. And then from university, how did you end up at Flipboard? Or did you already plan that I was going to go to Silicon Valley and work there at a tech startup?
No, I mean, I started programming when I was about 9, 8 or 9. I was lucky
Yeah.
enough, even though like there's some crazy stuff in my town, I was lucky enough to kind of be put into the quote unquote gifted program. And they had a computer. And so I'm going to be 40 in a couple months. And so this is like, late 80s.
40.
Thanks. I look 65. I feel 120. Um, so, but this is late 80s. So computers were like Commodores and funky, weird Apples and stuff like that. My family couldn't in a million years afford a computer. So I think eventually we bought like this weird Apple clone. You obviously don't remember, but there's a very brief period where I think Sully was in charge and he okayed clones. So like IBM clones, were the IBM made PCs and then they allowed people to clone the IBM architecture or whatever. And so Apple allowed this for a little while. You could buy these really crappy, cheap clones and they're just horrible. I think we eventually could afford one of those. But my neighbor, who was divorced and lost his kid in the divorce, and so I think was really lonely, he had a computer. And thankfully, he wasn't a pedophile or anything. He was just a nice guy. Um, I found out he had a computer. I was like, "Ooh, can I use it?" And I ended up going over so much and annoying him. He just gave me the key to his house, and he was just like, "Stop knocking, just come in and use the computer." And he bought me a phone line for the computer room, and I got online and I started doing like BBS stuff and Prodigy. And just immediately to me, as soon as I got on the World Wide Web, which was like I had a shell account, and you had to emulate a PPP socket to run a graphical browser. This is all in like Windows 3.1 or whatever. And I just remember thinking as soon as I saw the web, I'm like, oh yeah, obviously this is it. Done. Okay. Whatever we have to do to like focus on this, let's do that. And I was doing a bunch of IRC, ANSI art related work. And I
Hmm.
was kind of the youngest, one of the younger folks in these ANSI crews. So when I graduated high school, a bunch of these dudes, and they were all mainly dudes, had graduated college and they were in like California and they were
Oh.
starting little design agencies as the late 90s. And so I was able to get internships through these connections I made when I was 13 because of my neighbor who was nice enough to lend me
Wow.
his computer and not do creepy things to
Hmm.
me. It was this super wholesome, setup. And I just,
Yeah.
you know, it's one of these things that makes you realize, one weird little gesture, one kind little gesture can have just such like a ripple effect in someone's life. And I actually went to go thank that guy. His name was Tom.
Oh.
Went to go thank him a few years ago and he had died of a heart attack.
Oh
So,
shit.
thank people often and
Yeah.
quickly is kind of the takeaway there. So I ended up driving across America 4 times in my late teens in this little Honda Civic that didn't have, power anything, or it it was my great uncle's, and he bought it and then basically passed away right after he bought it. And it was just he got it with I didn't even know you could buy a car with no power anything and no AC, nothing. It was just like it
Damn.
was basically a shell of a car. And we drove that across country 4 times, and that was amazing to be able to just see America and get these little startups in basically Silicon Valley to pay for that,
Yeah.
for driving and gas and all that crap. So I already from late teens, I was like, okay, I was doing a little web design company when I was like
Yeah.
15, 16 in my hometown and doing 3D graphics and stuff like that. And then went out to California for a couple summers and was just like, this is fantastic. And then when I studied abroad, I wanted to get, spend a year abroad somewhere. I came to Japan. And in the middle of that, studying out here the first time, Silicon Valley collapsed. The first bubble popped.
Oh.
And so I was going to drop out of school and just go work for startups and kind of hack it away in Silicon Valley.
Mm-hmm.
And that happened. And I thought, well, all right, let me finish school instead. And so that it was a circuitous route. This is like early
I see.
2000s. And then
Yeah.
I eventually, when I went to Flipboard, that was in 2010. So it was like 10 years after all that happened. Basically, what sort of led to that was I had worked with everyone in Tokyo
Mm-hmm.
that I was inspired by. I'd sort of hunted
Oh.
down when I was like 27, 28, 29, the people that were most inspiring to me and working on like a global scale in Tokyo.
Mm-hmm.
And we started collaborating, and I just found I hit this kind of natural ceiling. And the next step in terms of working with, even higher level people, operating at a bigger scale was to go to Silicon Valley. And a connection I made in my early 20s with this guy, Marcos Westcamp, he messaged me and said, "Hey man, I'm working at this startup.
Yeah.
You should come talk to the CEO. I can't tell you what it is, but I think you'd like it." And so I went out there, met with Mike McHugh, and like within literally like 30 seconds, I was like, okay, I'm going to move out here and
Damn.
work with these guys. So it took a decade. That was the path. That was the destiny. A decade later.
A decade later. Oh my God. And there, you also end up meeting Dylan, who then goes on to start Figma. That is
Oh hell
insane.
yeah! Dylan was, I think, 6 years old when he 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 was like he was 18, maybe 19. I don't know. He was I don't think he was yet 20. No, he couldn't have been. I bet he was 18 when he was interning
Yeah.
at Flipboard. And with Dylan, it was just like immediately like this guy is just he's just a good soul, you know.
Wow.
And I mean, talk about lucky. That guy had kind of a charmed childhood in terms of access to
Mm-hmm.
amazing people, to great archetypes, and I think he's a wonderful example of how emotionally intelligent you can prep someone with a certain amount of emotional intelligence early on. And
Oh,
I feel like Dylan is much older emotionally than he is obviously
physically.
in temporally or whatever. Yeah. And it was just kind of amazing meeting him. It was like, oh wow, this 18-year-old just has so much wisdom. It was very weird. It was like, what's going on here? So amazing to see him succeed and to see, and Figma truly is just
Yeah.
killer. This is such a killer app. I love it.
And then, there's a couple of things I'm thinking about is now that you made the connection with Dylan, you could have potentially joined them at Figma. And then you also were the recipient of that Tech Fellows scholarship where you can just invest a grant into
Yeah.
startups. So did you think about like, hey, I met Dylan, he's going to maybe start a new company. Why don't I just take the grant and invest that in Figma?
That tech files thing was so weird. That was like just it. I don't know what happened to any of the money or the people. I have no idea what's going on. I got an email one day. It was just like, "Hey, you've been selected to get $100,000." I was just
Yeah.
like, "What?" I mean, it's just so it was pure Silicon Valley like bizarreness. They handed out $6 million to just or $2 million to a bunch of random. Anyway, it was very strange. The tech fellows money and Figma being started, I don't think happened at the same time. But full disclosure, I'm actually an investor in Figma.
Oh, wow. I did not know that.
I just invested my own money instead of Tech Fellows. So I was an angel and I did a pro rata on one of the seed rounds.
Holy shit. Like, that is insane. Oh my
But
God.
that's definitely totally connected to being 15 and thinking about stocks back then. And thinking about investments, as I don't know, if I have extra cash, one weird thing, I think because I grew up with not a lot of material possessions, is that I am extremely suspicious of material crap. I'm very, very, very suspicious. I've always been suspicious of owning too much, or having too high a
Mhm.
baseline cost of living.
Yeah.
So, I've been in Japan essentially for 20 years. And for most of the time I've lived here, I've never paid more than like $800 a month in rent, the first
Wow.
5 or 6 years that I was living here, my yearly cost of living was essentially $15,000. So
That's it?
anytime, yeah, it was like for food and lodging. And I wouldn't buy clothes. I don't know. To me, any extra money was an opportunity to invest in the ability to have freedom later on through doing stock investments, saving,
Yeah.
and then taking that money out, or selling stocks at the right time. Well, not the right time, but when you need it. You don't
Yes.
try to time the market. That's just being an idiot.
Absolutely.
But it's like I have this project that I need to work on, and I have, I don't know, when I was like 25, I probably had about, you know, 40 or $50,000 saved, in various stocks. And like, I would pain me, but I'd be like, all right, I need $1,000 to do this, like this experiment or this project or work on this book. And I would sort of like pull from that. But, so by the time I'm in my 30s and in Silicon Valley, doing investments like that for friends, with friends, or with companies I believed in. I was also an early investor in Timbuktu, which did the book Goodnight Stories for Rebel Girls, which is the most crowdfunded book ever. And they went on to do, a couple of other books. They're all million copy bestsellers. So just, and that was Elena and Francesca were just these two incredible women who were just, you met up with them and it was just obvious these women were going to be successful and they were going to work on great, impactful, meaningful projects. And because I had started building up this habit of investment from when I was like 15, and this
Yeah.
habit of, it's like money. I made more money in 1 year at Flipboard, working at Flipboard, than I did in basically 10 years of working up to Flipboard. So it was just this like, I was basically a monk coming out of a cave in India into
Yeah.
Silicon Valley in terms of like
Yeah.
my burn rate. And even when I moved to Palo Alto, I lived with two other guys, and in 2010,
Okay.
Palo Alto was still sort of reasonably. So my burn rate in Palo Alto was almost nothing, and I had savings from the work. I was just socking all that money away.
Damn.
And so when, Lane and Francesca, or, whenever these opportunities came up
Yeah.
to support someone I totally believed in, it was like, okay, great. Instead of putting this in the public market, let's start
Private
diversifying
market. Yeah.
into these private markets. And that was kind of what led to that work.
And it's insane that you're also an investor in Designer Fund, like Ben.
Yeah.
And oh my God, these guys are so amazing. I had a chance to meet them when I was in SF, and oh my God.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Enrique was my roommate for 3 years. And,
No way.
yeah, man, I love Enrique to bits, man. He's like one of my, he's like a mentor. He taught me how to hug again. Like
Oh.
I moved in with Enrique and I got more hugs in like a week than I had in about a decade. And I
Oh
was just like,
my God.
oh, this is what I've been missing in life. Hugs. Super amazing, beautiful bro hugs. Ah, they're so good. And then hummus. All we ate was hummus. Our entire refrigerator was just full of hummus. It was such a weird 3 years, man. We cranked like crazy. That was one of the most beautiful, like love filled, work filled, let's be better. How do we make each other better? Periods of life. Life changing. Going and moving to Palo Alto and living with those guys. Absolutely. Just incredible. It was Enrique Allen, and Ben Henritig was the other guy. And Ben is this amazing filmmaker, and he was just cranking away too. So yeah, when Enrique, basically brainstorming Designer Fund, in the kitchen nightly, I'd come back from Flipboard and we just like riff on stuff. So when, again, when I saw he was going to do that, I was totally behind it. They actually made a very generous offer for me to join as a partner, but this is right when I was trying to figure out, what my next steps were. And I wanted to just focus on writing and I wanted to focus on, a lot of the stuff that I'm doing now. And so I said no, which is kind of crazy. I found their offer letter the other day in Dropbox paper. It was like it's the only document in Drop. And I was looking at it, I was just like, Jesus, man, like this is so generous. But I had this very clear pull of what I wanted to be doing. And I knew that I couldn't do that if I joined somewhere full time. And so I said, look, I want to be involved as much as I can and support
Mhm.
you guys as much as I can. And please, use me in any way you want, but I can't do a full time thing.
Wow. So, what does your day look like? Do you have like a structured day? Because I mean, you're doing so many things. I mean, doing your writing, you have all these like angel investments. You're a mentor to startups.
So the investing stuff, I really have cut back on like almost completely. So I was most active as like a angel investor 2010, 11, 12, 13,
Hmm.
14, basically. And then a big part of what was attractive about Designer Fund was becoming a limited partner there.
Yeah.
And, as most of investing is about deal flow and about
Yeah.
connections. And so because I'm not in Silicon Valley,
I
um,
see.
so, if you're not in Silicon Valley meeting people and connecting with people, and then angel investing just doesn't make sense. And I just found it was kind of interesting, but not, it's sort of a lot of work. You end up losing quite a bit of money. You have to be, willing to watch stuff kind of, money evaporate. And so Designer Fund for me is sort of my proxy, my investing proxy.
I see.
And I trust them with the deal flow. And then, I can chime in and, I can direct. If I meet a company,
Hmm.
which is more rare these days, if I meet someone who's doing a company and looking for funding, I can push them in the direction of Designer Fund and say, hey, talk with Enrique and Ben and, see what they have to say. I don't do really any active investing, private investing at all anymore. So that has like almost no play, maybe 10 minutes out of the year I spend on that. But otherwise, my daily schedule is really it contingent on the projects, that I'm working on in that moment.
Hmm.
So for the last couple of months, it's been book design,
Yeah.
production, you know, essentially setting up a publishing machine. I don't want to say
Hmm.
publishing company because it's just sort of for my own work. But
Yeah.
it's like this machine I'm trying to set up with fulfillment,
Mhm.
shipping, logistics, all that stuff baked into it, and also, like building that Craigsstarter thing, that Kickstarter clone on Shopify. It's
Yeah.
like, how do I build this system that once it's running, I can step away from and focus on what I want to focus on, which is the storytelling
Yeah.
and the book creation, which to me is everything. Putting out those archetypes, working on those stories, inspiring people through that work to me is the whole reason you build this other system behind it. Even enable even more of that to happen on my own terms without having to go through traditional publishing channels, which, has its ups and downs.
Yeah.
But, I've been making books now for 18 years. And
Wow.
I think I can do a pretty good job at it. So I'm pretty confident about that. And if I can do it on my own terms, I don't know. I just feel like there's a little more room to experiment and maybe a little more value in some ways through doing that. And
Hmm.
it puts a stake in the ground for other folks who may be thinking about doing similar independent publishing work. And it allows them to kind of look at this and go, oh, okay, that it allows us to be an archetype. People can look at it and go, "Oh,
Oh
that's how you
yeah.
do that. Okay, let me try that now." Because that's really what essentially mimics were like
Hmm.
chimpanzee mimics essentially. And it's like unless you see someone doing something, it's
Yeah.
hard to imagine yourself doing it. And so that's why, I try to write these breakdowns. I try to explain how does the membership program work? How does the newsletter system work? How do you use all of these things to enable a kind of freedom and a sort of work that you're excited by? And I think,
Yeah.
if more people can do that, then that's just a total net positive for the world. And so, just constantly trying to explain that, to provide that archetype. This is how you do it. Copy me, please.
You're the perfect archetype for newsletter subscription and just growing one's business or passion through that. I remember reading a lot of your blogs on it, like how the whole newsletter stuff works, how to create a good one, the membership model. And I'm kind of curious, like, when did you actually get the idea that, hey, I should have my own newsletter? Now, obviously, it's at like 17,000 plus subscribers, but at one point it was zero. So walk me through that journey from like zero to like where it's now.
I started the first newsletter, wrote in like 2011, maybe end of 2011, beginning of 2012. And that was because I wrote this essay called Subcompact Publishing that got picked up all over the place. And I wanted to capture that attention. Up until that point, the way I was capturing it was like basically, if you read an essay of mine, the takeaway was sort of follow me on Twitter.
Yeah.
And I think I was just getting a little bit sick of Twitter. And I think Tiny Letter might have popped up then and was kind of, getting some play, and newsletters were just back on the radar. And so I set up a newsletter and it just, instantly had a couple thousand subscribers. But I didn't take it seriously. I didn't, those newsletters, I was like, because at that point too, I was still performative literary mode where I was like, okay, I'm going to sort of renounce everything tech related. I'm going to go into these literary caves and I'm only going to write fiction. But it was, that was an important sort of, exploratory modality for me. And so the early road newsletters were like, ooh, this is going to be a newsletter, but it's going to be really special. And anyway, there was no schedule and they were weird and I didn't have enough rigor of process behind them. And it wasn't until the start of 2019 that I set up a schedule. And so, 18 months ago is when I said, all right, this is how it's going to go. Ridgeline is weekly, new newsletter. Rodin is monthly, and I'm going to stick to that. My advice for anyone doing newsletters is two things. One is have a schedule because you're often not going to want to, you feel like, quote unquote, feel inspired. But, 99% of writing is just getting your butt in the chair, turning off distractions and just forcing yourself to write a few sentences. And then, more often than not, there's a lot more there. So it's like, it's silly, and so you have to just treat it like a job and have deadlines. Another thing too is to think about it in terms of seasons. So I think a lot of people can be overwhelmed if they say, all right, I'm going to start a newsletter. I'm going to do it weekly and I've got to do this forever. That's what freezes people. It's like, you got to do it forever. Oh my God. And then you do like 5 of them. And you're like, I can't do this forever. So think about it in terms of seasons and say, look, season 1 of this newsletter is going to be for like 2 months. And you just got to do it for 2 months. And then you can decide if you want to do season 2 or whatever. I find that's like a technique for freeing up this kind of cognitive stress or worry about, oh man, what have I committed to? Well, you don't have to commit to that much.
So I would say that by the time you became diligent about focusing on the newsletter, you already had a huge following on Twitter. I mean, now it's insane too, 30,000 plus, but I mean, assuming 2019, it was also like quite high. So that probably helped, I'm assuming, get a lot of people to sign up for the newsletter from your tweets. What I want your advice on would be, so I've got designmba.show, the podcast pretty much. And then my next step is kind of launching my own blog, designmba.blog, where I want to share some stories and kind of like build an email newsletter. And I know it sounds very typical, like, hey, you build an email newsletter and then later if you have a product, you can sell it. So what advice would you have for me in terms of starting off when I don't have a huge following like you for the blog, I guess I would say?
Well, I mean, when I started writing blogs or essays, it was less blog-ish and more, kind of designed essays that I would spend a couple months on some of these essays, and that was in 2009. I started really writing these these kind of chunky essays for the web where I'd think of them as, both literarily, design-wise, photographically, and kind of do these almost like these big, kind of like, it was almost like product announcements for these essays. And those did really well, and that's kind of what started a lot of, any kind of following I have right now.
Oh, so it was the other way around, it seems.
It was essays. I found that, in 2009, I had, I don't know, probably 1,000 followers on Twitter or something like that.
Oh.
And, I started doing these big essays and committing to them and, really spending like a month or 2 on one of these essays. And then just really banging the drum when I put them out there, so like reaching out to people, putting it on people's radar that I respected. A piece of advice I give to folks often is, if you want to connect with interesting people in the world, you have to bring something concrete to the table. So like one of the reasons I said yes to this podcast is because you didn't just email me, which a lot of people do. And they're just like, hey, I have this podcast. It'd be great. It's like, okay, but you produced something, you made something. And like so few people make things, and so you put that on the table. You said, look, man, I made this video. I'm going to fucking tell you exactly what I want, what we're going to talk about. I'm going to prove to you that I didn't just read,
Yeah.
half of one of your essays and, and because I just want to fill up my, my roster of podcast people. And so, you can do the same thing with your own work. So like when I would finish a big essay,
Yeah.
I would look to everyone in that field and it's, that I respected and looked up to, and I'd email them and say, hey, and not like a big crazy weird email, but just be like, hey,
Yeah.
look, your work has been a big inspiration to me.
Mm.
And that inspiration has kind of fueled my ability to produce this thing. I want to show you, I want to share that with you.
Mm.
And then, not asking questions, not being like, hey man, can we do a Zoom or, a Skype back then, let's get coffee, none of that, but just saying like, hey man, I respect your work. Your work has inspired me. This is what I've made.
Yeah.
And then, more often than not, if you've made something, interesting, not,
Yeah.
it has to be, don't be a bullshitter. Don't like spend, 2 hours on something and be like, hey man, this really, like, no, like really put the work in, more often than not, people will respond to that because it's so rare
Yeah.
for someone to bring something concrete to the table. So like I would, work on these essays, put them out there, and then just email everyone that I was inspired by
Yeah.
and loved, and they would write about it or tweet it or whatever. And that helped. That just kind of expanded the circle. And then that increased the Twitter followers and blah, 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 all that crap. And then, yeah, of course, when starting a newsletter,
Mhm.
if you have a following on a certain social media platform, that's a great seed. I actually have, I'm not very good at growing my newsletter.
Oh.
I'm not like a super strong promoter of it. This is probably something I should like return to maybe at the end
Mhm.
of the year, thinking about ways to grow that audience. But I really like the scale I'm at. I mean, this is another question I think that's really important for people to ask
Mhm.
themselves is like, what scale inspires you? What are you inspired by? Like, what scale do you want to operate at? And at Flipboard, we launched, I worked hard on this product,
Mhm.
we're all nighters and
Yeah.
we're going to launch this crazy thing. And I'm working with the best people, the most
Mhm.
talented, smartest, kindest people I'd ever met. And we put this product out and, instantly overnight, it's like millions of new users and like, oh my God, 80
Yeah.
million users now on the platform.
Yeah.
Blah. And I realized one of the reasons I left was I was like, that does not inspire me. That scale is totally unimportant to me. I just
Oh,
am not like, this is why, like, working at Google or working at Facebook to me is just
yeah.
not interesting. It's like, I don't care about that like billion user scale.
I
I
see.
just don't. I like the intimacy of like 10,000 and fewer. So like,
Mhm.
this is why, a lot of the books I do are like 1,000 copies, and, working up from there. I find that is the scale for me that allows me to tell a certain kind of story, a human story. As soon as you start doing work for, tens of millions or billions of people, there's a
Mhm.
kind of dilution that has to happen implicitly because the scale is so big. And so obviously you lose intimacy, but through losing that intimacy, you lose the ability to tell a certain kind of story. So right now, I mean, my newsletters or whatever, I just feel pretty good. It's the membership program is going well and it's like growing and at a rate I'm happy with. It's enabling all sorts of really interesting work. So right now, that scale, I don't feel like I have to do
Yeah.
work to pump it up, And I
I
think
see.
so that what that just means is I can take that energy I
Mhm.
would normally use for like more like pump up promotion-y stuff. I don't even know what that looks like. And
Yeah.
I can just pour it into, the books and,
Mhm.
and now I'm starting to do some video stuff and, thinking about that. And so pour it into this creative work, which is where I want the majority of my energy to go. I don't want to get sidetracked or distracted by these other kind of growth hacks or things like that. That's not interesting to me.
That is so deep. You're essentially staying small on purpose. I mean, there's just something about you. I mean, I could go on a whole length about it. Maybe it's, I've also attended Vipassana in Texas last year. So I also feel like to everything you say, there's like this deep thought out process. Like it takes balls, man, to just, I would say, walk away from being a partner or go away from private investing full time, even though there might be potential for more money, but to focus on what you're doing and staying small on purpose. Because even I get delusional. I'm like, oh my God, I gotta like launch this newsletter. And I just like in terms of tech stack, I just got like a ghost like set up on DigitalOcean. Like that's what I'm doing to do the blog. And then essentially my thought is like, okay, well, Craig has got this many like followers or he's got like this many like subscriptions to this membership program. I gotta do it too. And then I'm like, damn, dude, you haven't like produced that value that's going to bring that people. I think with you, you create these pieces, whether it's your newly successful book that launched $100,000, like Kissa by Kissa. I think what I'm learning from you is, and maybe this is just like a self, like I'm just walking myself through it, is I maybe just need to focus on creating those essays, like you said, and writing those pieces and just create a blog, share that. And if people like it, they will resonate and then come to it instead of me trying to like growth hack this newsletter.
Yeah. Well, I mean, people feel whether or not something is genuine. I think they intuitively understand that. And let me take a second to talk about walking away from stuff, because I think that is an important point. And it's easy to talk about, but it's difficult to kind of understand the psychology there. So a couple things. One, being able to walk away from stuff requires a certain amount of financial autonomy and a lack of debt. And so, my advice to basically late teens, early 20s people or folks going to college is to focus on, if they want to be, an artist or a writer or work in a field that historically does not pay extreme amounts of money, is you don't need to go to $40,000 a year university. Like, don't take that debt on. Just don't do it. I was lucky enough when I was going to school, it wasn't that crazy expensive. I was able to get scholarships. My mom, for whatever insane reason, started saving for her unborn child's college when she was 20. I have no idea why she started doing this. So my mom started socking money away when she was 20, adopted me when she was like 28. And so, she was able to put away enough money where I was really lucky not to have to take on debt. There was this kind of combination of things that, I'm working in the background, scholarships, and cost of school not being that crazy. So like, that's really important to recognize, is like that kind of, not entitlement, but but being in an extremely privileged position of, not having $100,000 of debt sitting on your shoulders right when you graduate. So that I intuitively recognize that. And then I did not want to take on anything that took away the freedom of that no debt. So that's why I was, how do I keep cost of living low? How do I, living in super tiny places, to just, everything is for focusing on the creative work that I felt in my gut. I remember, when I was 19, I had an internship that was paying really well out in Silicon Valley at this company called Electronics for Imaging. They're like a printer company. They still make, I think, printer software. And they basically said to me at the end of the summer, say, hey, we'll cover the rest of school for you. Come work for us full time, yada, yada, yada. And I just knew, after having spent the summer there, that it was not of my destiny to work in a company. Just like, I respected the people I worked with. I found the work pretty interesting, but I felt the pull. I knew there was other work I wanted to do. And I knew that it did not happen inside of the walls, of an office. And, and I just remember saying to them on the exit interview, like, thank you so much, but I have to go do this other stuff, and then move to Japan. And then actually Japan was a further hack to keeping costs low, because school in Japan was even cheaper than school in America. So I was able to study out here at a fraction of the cost and get scholarships. And so, again, 10 years later, when, I'm at Flipboard and I'm leaving Flipboard after 15 months, which was crazy. I was one of the first people to quit the company. And like, at that point, it was like the rocket ship was just going. And, it was like, every month I would get, an extra, I don't know, $10,000 or something in the bank. It was just like more, it was weird. They just kept giving me bonuses without telling me. I was, that's just how I was looking. And I was just like, what is going on? And, walking away from that was really weird and tough. I was, Ev Williams wanted really badly to hire me at Medium, right when Medium had launched. And I walked away from that, and,
oh my God.
But I'm not saying that to brag, to be like, hey man, all these people want to hire me. I'm saying that because I had real crazy opportunities that I said no to, not because I was afraid of the opportunities, but because I had such a strong pull to this other thing, right? Life is so short, so short. And I felt in my gut, I had to do these other things. I just had to do them. And I knew I just came
Yeah.
from the cave in India. I was just living in a cave in India. I don't
Wow.
need to make $300,000 a year. I don't need to make, metaphorical cave. I don't need to buy fancy watches. I don't need
Yeah.
Maseratis. I don't need any of
Yeah.
this crap. I don't need to do private jet shit. None of that defines who I am at all. Zero, 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 zero. And the most expensive thing I ever bought in my life was a few years ago when I bought that Leica Q. And it was
Oh.
such outside of, I bought a car when I was living in California and then
Mm-hmm.
sold it on the way out. But like that Q, I bought that Q and it was like $5,000 or $6,000. And I had a panic attack when I was buying it because to me, it was like so dissonant from like my identity of
Yeah.
who I was to own something that was like kind of luxurious or whatever. So the ability to say no or step away from these opportunities required two things. One, building up this incredible habit of not defining myself based on material things, right?
Yeah.
Which I'd started in my early 20s and which really started when I was, a kid because we had nothing
Mm-hmm.
material really in our house. We had, I had
Mm-hmm.
no concept of brand name stuff. We'd go to Kmart, for back to school stuff. And I remember, yeah, I just remember, I'd wear the same shirt to school like four days in a row
Wow.
because I only had like two shirts I liked. And so that is such a powerful habit that is almost impossible to build up in your 30s or 40s because
Yeah.
you've already, inured yourself to a certain amount of material,
Yeah.
comfort. And so something I tell people, constantly who are in college, who are about to graduate, keep that recurring costs low. Like just do not go for the expensive apartment. Don't get addicted to buying a bunch of clothes and all that crap.
Don't buy that
Get
Beamer.
addicted don't buy the Beamer. Get addicted to savings. Get it, buy a weird Suzuki. You can get these
Yeah.
amazing Suzukis for like, $10,000. If you need a car, get a Suzuki. A Jimny. A Jimny is so cool, man. It's like the G Wagon. It's like a mini G Wagon for like 1/20th the price. It's awesome. I love them. It's really, really fantastic. But, you know, build up that habit if you want to do a certain kind of work. That's important. If you want to work at startups and like just crank on companies, man, go for it. That's
Yeah.
great. That was not my destiny. I did not feel
Yeah.
that in my heart. And in fact, that was part of going out to Silicon Valley was to stress that, to try that out.
Yeah.
What does it really feel like? I thought that was part of my
Mm-hmm.
destiny. And I think I could have continued down that path and it would have been financially extremely successful.
Mm-hmm.
That's for sure. But I also knew that a lot of money, wasn't going to change what I felt in my heart in terms of the work that I really wanted to be focusing on. So being able to walk away from those things required that, decades of habit building. And then on
Yeah.
top of that, it required a clear sense of what I wanted to work on. You can't have
Yeah.
this amorphous idea of like, oh man, I'm going to be like an artist or a writer. It's like,
Yeah.
I was like, I'm writing this book. I have this book to write. I'm going to keep
Yeah.
writing this book. That was what I'm going to work on. And so you need to have both of those things, I think, to be able to say no to superficially, incredible opportunity. Because what you're really saying yes to in these situations is a
Yeah.
kind of spiritual opportunity, which is like much harder to quantify. It's so hard to quantify spiritual crap. It's like
Yeah.
I was saying no to mega paycheck and working on like big platforms or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But I was saying yes to a certain kind of exploratory freedom that to me defined in a
Mm-hmm.
lot of ways in terms of what I feel like I can do with life
Yeah.
and with, being alive. It defined for me the best way to respect being alive. That's how it felt to me. There was like this deep philosophical, almost like spiritual component to it, where it's like
Yeah.
being alive is a special thing.
Yeah.
And, it's like, it's important to recognize that. So not just like take that for
Mm-hmm.
granted. Life is extremely short. We're essentially dead. And, at the end, when you look back on it, for me, I know that there's just like three or four things that like I still need to do that, I'm working on. That's important for me to get done. So anyway, it was a combination of all that,
Yeah.
building up this habit of low material, needs to self-identify with, building up this other habit of committing to creative work and understanding creative work, building up the habit of following this internal compass, and then, being financially smart, over the years and kind of understanding how to save and build up a cushion. All that's critical to being able to say no when someone comes to you with,
Yeah.
a big sort of check or something.
I think that was much needed to me. So I quit my job at AT&T in June, And it was hard, man. I'm in Dallas, Texas, so obviously it's a little bit cheaper than San Francisco, and I was making $120,000 a year. I'm
It's amazing.
29. I've got a financial advisor, like the guy who's doing like the investing for me and stuff. And so that stuff, like definitely, like I feel just like you gave me a little bit of impetus. Like, hey, you know what? If I want to do the podcast, if I want to like explore that area, I can do it. And if worse comes worse, like in Jan, I can always, or Feb or whatever, next year, I can try to go back and just try to get a full-time job. But I need to really like go full throttle on this before I just say yes to other commitments.
Yeah.
And I guess one advice I want to ask from you is you're a phenomenal writer. I'm assuming that's because I guess I wanted your advice on how do I become a better writer? Is it like books that I read, or is it just drafts that I keep on practicing, get other people to review? Like, how did you become a better writer?
Writing has always been important to me. So
Mm-hmm.
when I was a teenager, I actually started building blog software when I was like 17, 16, 17, 18, like proto blogging software. Like so this is like a good example of like being exposed to the right people at the right time. Like
Yeah.
I just didn't have people around me that knew how to build businesses
Yeah.
or work on things like that. And so, but if I had, I could have imagined, Blogger was right there. I was essentially building Blogger because writing was so important to me, and I wanted better platforms to write on the web because there really weren't any. And so writing has always, always, always been exciting to me. And being a novelist has always been like something that, was an appealing idea to me.
Mm-hmm.
And, in college, I was doing writing workshops
Mm-hmm.
and, I got reading a ton. But I would say, just fundamentally to be a better writer, you need to develop your ear.
Yeah.
So that's reading. So you got to read the right people and you got to read them closely,
Mm-hmm.
read, and try to understand what's happening, in the work as you're reading it, and try to mimic. Mimicry, I think, like I was saying earlier, is a powerful way to understand how something happens. And then, yeah, just more than anything, it's doing a lot of writing, just tons of it, and rewriting, tons of rewriting. It's just a skill. That's
Mm-hmm.
all it is. I mean, you can you can improve your ear
Mm-hmm.
to a degree, but part of that is sort of implicit. But you can definitely make your ear better, so you can hear, you can kind
Mm-hmm.
of hear clunkier prose or whatever just by reading more. You just read, constantly read. And I'm extremely strict about, if I start a book and the voice is not a voice that I want to have part of my
Yeah.
sort of my foundation as a writer, if I don't want to have this voice, if I'm not interested in it, if it doesn't hit me in the right way, I stop reading it immediately. I drop books really fast. And so I tend to focus on and reread a lot of the same books. So like people like Annie Dillard, for example. Annie Dillard, like if you're looking to write interesting essays
Mm-hmm.
and you want to be inspired about form, and you
Mm-hmm.
want to go, you want to kind of think about how far can I push
Yeah.
an essay? What can it look like?
Mm-hmm.
Pick up Annie Dillard essay collection.
Okay.
And she's just operating at such a wonderful level. And she provides such a strong archetype for, this is how you can do this in the world. It's crazy. I just reread Dennis Johnson's Train Dreams this morning. So, part of like my schedule, you asked about schedule
Mm-hmm.
earlier, is that I try to not touch the internet until like afternoon.
Oh.
And so when I wake up, and I'm on crazy schedule now. It's not great. I'm waking up, I'm going to bed really late because I'm doing these calls late at night, and all
Mm-hmm.
the COVID stuff has kind of made, just a bunch of weird Zoom stuff happening, in the middle of the night over here. So I wake up and I'm not allowed to do any internet crap.
Mm-hmm.
Look at the phone, look at anything, because I find instantly that pulls my brain out of this kind of quiet, it activates this kind of messiness in the
Yeah.
brain, which I find is not in any way conducive to good writing. And so if I don't feel like writing, which is almost every day, I don't feel like writing. It's like, runners, you talk to runners and like most of them don't ever feel like running when they wake up in the morning. But if I don't feel like writing, the only thing I'm allowed to do is read. And
Oh.
so I read, and then often what happens is I'll start reading, and about half an hour to reading, if I'm reading the right stuff, I'll
Mm-hmm.
be so inspired by a sentence, it'll just kick something off in the brain. It's like kindling,
Yeah.
and it just starts this sort of this chain reaction, and then I have to go whoosh, run and start
Yeah.
working and start writing. And I've basically turned my iPad into a writing machine where I've blocked the internet on it. I've deleted everything on it that's distracting. And it's just this kind of overpriced writing, writing tablet essentially. And so I find that also to be useful. So you can't, even just the existence of a temptation on a device, for me, again, pulls the brain out of this kind of contemplative writing space. And, because what's happening when you're writing is you're problem solving a lot of times. And when the impulse, I think a lot of us have when we encounter a problem or encounter a bit of friction in life anywhere, is to reach for the internet, pick up the phone. And so when you're writing, because you're problem solving, you're going to inevitably hit a bunch of problems. And if you have anything nearby that lets you swerve or ignore the problem, game over. You're not going to solve it in an interesting way. So the best way to solve a problem, if you're really stuck, is to go for a walk. There's something about the distraction of the internet is not allowing for background processes to happen. So that background problem solving does not happen if you're looking at crap on the internet. If you're binging, or there's something chemical, at least for me, there's something chemical about it that it's, I don't know if it's dopamine rush or what, but it's almost like a casino just starts up in the head, and I lose all ability to sort of exist gracefully. I lose grace in my being. And so anyway, that's how I think about the schedules. And that's, you need to build up that habit. And if you do that, if you read good writers and read Bird by Bird.
Reading that currently.
That's a great, Anne Lamott, great book. Read books, read Stephen King's On Writing. It's a great book too. But fill your brain with good writing and set a schedule and force yourself to write more. Just treat it like a job. You'll get better.
Wow. Whew, man.
It's so like anything.
Smart at the moment. Oh my God. So how do people get in touch with you? How do people follow you? How do people contact you?
Yeah, I mean, subscribing to the newsletters is probably the best thing. Subscribe to the newsletters, join the membership program, give me money.
And how do they find the membership program?
Support my pseudo-monastic life. It's craigma.com/membership. And it's called Special Projects. That's the name of the membership program. But yeah, the newsletters are the best thing. The reason why I like newsletters, you own that. You own the newsletter. You own those email addresses in the sense of you can bring them with you if you need to switch email providers. A newsletter, the email space for the most part is fairly static. I've seen writers, for example, commit to Facebook, and, Facebook is this ever evolving, horrible demon organism monster thing. You never know what it's going to look like 6 months from now. So you may be investing in and committing to this platform in one form, and then in 6 months, it's a different form, and it's not a form that you work well with. I treat, Twitter and Instagram as ephemeral, and I assume they're going to be gone, and I assume they're going to disappear. And I base, again, it's this thing of like investing. There's this recurring theme going on here. It's like, how do I future-proof my ability to keep doing this work? If I am completely dependent on, like, say, Instagram, there could be a day Instagram doesn't work anymore. And so then I'm, out of luck. And so email and the newsletters to me feel the most durable of all the platforms and the most likely to be around in, say, 20 years. And so that feels worth, the investment.
And how much can one expect to make if at some point they were to reach maybe 17,000 subscribers or 20,000 subscribers? And just,
how much money you can make on the newsletter stuff is totally contingent on what you're writing about. It's like, it's all specific to the value you're providing. I mean, Ben Thompson was making millions, almost immediately because, that value of here is actionable inside, high quality analysis of tech stuff. Like, I'll give you $100 a year or whatever it was. It was like fairly cheap when he started. It was like, I'll pay you $100 a year because I know that is going to turn directly into, thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars in profit for me, because I'll make investments based on, what I'm reading in here. And so I think like newsletters that are finance related and fun are probably the easiest to make money off of. Stuff like mine, which is, I don't even know how to categorize what I do. I mean, it's almost like performance art in some ways.
Yeah.
You're not going to, you're definitely not going to make as much money. So don't live in San Francisco in a $5,000 a month apartment and do a newsletter about walking. If that's your business plan, you will be sad very quickly. You will go broke extremely fast. My cost of living, again, living in Japan, cost of living is extremely controlled, and also healthcare. This is something that I think independent American creators have to contend with, which is just the stupidity of the health system there, and the costs, it can be so high. And here in Japan, thankfully, we operate on a fairly rational, socialist-esque healthcare system. So, that is non-trivial. Moving to a country that, you know, takes away that, a huge chunk of worry, if heaven forbid some kind of health crisis befalls
Yeah.
you, that's an incredibly powerful, again, investment in yourself to enable a certain kind of freedom going forward. Yeah, I think that's important. You can be overly obsessive about, being defensive and building up defenses to protect freedoms. And so you do have to take some risks, and you have to say, okay, I'm going to sell a little bit of this. I'm going to take some of the savings out and put it into this project. But there's a certain habit of, I'm shocked by the number of grown ass humans I know that don't have a brokerage account. That's crazy to me. It's totally crazy. It's completely bonkers. I'm just like, to me, that mode of savings is so, intrinsic, because I was lucky enough to do that stock investing club in high school, that, I can't imagine that not being part of, the portfolio of things I'm doing to enable, work going forward. You can overdo it too, but definitely email's a good platform to invest in.
Thank you so much, Craig, for coming on the show, man. It's been a blast. Like, I had such a blast learning from you. I got the final much needed motivation to walk away from superficial things, even though they sound good on paper. But thanks so much, man.
Yeah. I mean, nice things are important when they're tools, I think. Everything that I spend money on, for the most part, is a tool. And investing in good tools is a great investment, often because you can sell them for almost what you bought them for if it turns out that you aren't going to use that tool. But and so I'm not like, this mic is an expensive mic, it's plugged into this expensive USB interface and blah blah blah. But these are all tools that I'm trying and committing to. That's also the interesting thing. Sometimes there's this fallacy: you can spend money on a tool and then not use it, or just don't buy the Leica if you think it's going to make you a great photographer. But there is, if you're already committed to photography, and then buying the Leica, if that sort of is a weird kick to further push you to do even more work, but you already have to have that habit built up of doing a lot of work, then go for it. And think about it from a business perspective. Think about it. Okay, well, if I buy this camera and I have this following and I start selling prints, then how much can I make on the prints and da da da. So, like, for example, with the Kissa by Kissa book, I sold prints along with it. I did, what did I do? I did edition of, I think, 30, and I sold the prints for like $200. So that's $6,000 right there, right? And we sold all the prints. So that's $6,000. That's like directly, I can draw a line between that $6,000 and my photographic tools. Wow. And you go, okay, that's interesting. And so I was thinking about investing in a printer, because I was like, I'd like to do more of these things. But this time I worked with a printer in Tokyo, and so the upfront cost was bigger. But it's like, now that I know there is this interest, that gives me the permission to now go spend the money in a high quality tool, because I can see the business, the sustainability around it. It's not just buying the tool to fetishize the tool. It's buying it with a specific purpose, and you buy the good one because you're going to continue to use it. And the good one often, in the end, is cheaper in some ways because it's more durable, it lasts longer, things like that. Yes, but generally, the important thing is recurring costs. That's the real material thing. auto loans, mortgages,
Yes.
rents, eating out at super fancy restaurants too much, buying super fancy groceries too often. Those are the things that over time basically are the difference between massive, massive spiritual freedoms in terms of, exploring the world and feeling like you have the ability to explore it because you're not trying to constantly bring in enough to cover that fixed cost. So
Mm-hmm.
it's the difference between that and going, okay, I got to hustle another consulting gig
Yeah.
because I've got to hit these costs. Like in my 20s, I could do essentially I could do a month of consulting and that would cover a year of living. That was that was the ratio. That's a good ratio.
It's an
Frank,
insane ratio.
well, and that was just because I was choosing to live in Tokyo and I was making choices about the places I lived in. And, Frank Camaro, the designer, one of his essays is about like, he had this like chart that you would put up on the wall,
Mm-hmm.
and it would be like days of work to freedom. And he'd map out how many more freelance days he had to do until he could be done for the year and work on his own projects. But, it's important to understand where those lines are. And you can control those lines by controlling fixed costs.
Absolutely. Thank you
Thus
so
ends my
much.
TED Talk on fixed costs. Keep your fixed costs low.
Oh my God. I feel like you should just have another career in a financial advisor for designers.
Sure. That'll be the newsletter that makes me money.
Yeah, I should really should.